Welcome to the Garden Talk podcast, where we interview growers from all over the world, both beginners and experts, seeking to learn more about what they know about gardening and how they do things in their garden. What's up, everybody? For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris, aka Mr. Grow It, and you're tuned into the Garden Talk podcast. This is episode number 166. In this episode, I interview Matt Powers. He has been gardening for 16 years and is an author, educator, and a citizen scientist. He has advanced knowledge when it comes to gardening, and that's what we're going to get into in today's episode. We get into a variety of topics, such as pH, Redox Potential, Mycorrhizal Fungi, mushroom blocks, the 24-hour light cycle, and more. If you want to see short clips of these podcast episodes, search Garden Talk Clips on YouTube. I also have a gardening channel where I show the plants that I grow. Both of those channels will be linked down in the YouTube description section below. One of my goals for this podcast is to bring free information about gardening to the general public. That being said, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's episode who helped make that goal possible. Thanks to AC Infinity for sponsoring this episode. Check out their Instant Potting Mix, a soilless grow medium made from 100% organic cocoa coir fiber. It's buffered and triple washed to maintain pH stability and reduce salinity. It comes in a 2-pound brick, which expands to fill up to a 3-gallon grow pot. Click the link in the description section below so you can learn more about their Instant Potting Mix. And the discount code MrGrowIt15 works on both Amazon and their website, acinfinity.com. Stash Blend. Several additives in one blend, so you no longer have to buy individual bottles. Check it out at stashblend.com, link in the description section below, and use the discount code THESTASH. And we are back, and I'm joined with Matt Powers. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining the podcast. You have been on my list for many, many years. And to be honest with you, you're one of the more advanced folks. It's taken me a while to kind of build up some knowledge that I'll be able to ask you some more advanced questions, I feel like, because you do have just a huge, very extensive background when it comes to not only teaching, but being an author, educator. We're going to get into that. We'll do an introduction here. But after that, I'm just going to fire away some, let's say difficult questions, but We'll get you some decent questions here that are going to make you think, I hope.
Heck yeah.
Can you introduce yourself? Maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into gardening?
Yeah. So for many of us in this space, John Kemp, when I recently interviewed him, he said this, and I completely resonated with it, is that many of us got into this because of health crises. I have Crohn's, and I started trying to eat better. I discovered organic and stuff right around the time period when I met my wife. And I was 131 pounds. I'm almost 180 pounds. Just to give you an idea, I'm almost 6'2". So I was 130 pounds. I couldn't really hold on to any muscle, no fat. And my wife also got cancer. Second year into our marriage, and when our firstborn was 1 year old, and food was the thing I could control because the doctors were liars and they caused more cancer than they didn't solve anything. They cut things out, and then they created more cancer. And so it was a real difficult time because I didn't know what I could do. I started trying to do the Gerson therapy. And then I just tapped out financially and mentally, and because I was the person doing the juicing and the removing the fibers from the food. And 2 years of that, I went crazy. My wife was like, "Please stop. You're stressing me out more than I think it's helping." And so I started gardening, but it was 140 degree soils. I'm in the foothills above Fresno, so a bare soil in 112 degree ambient compounds. So everyone thought I was crazy for gardening. I felt like I had no choice. And so I started gardening the initial year before the animals found it, looked really good. And then the second year, they all found it and destroyed it. And then my father-in-law brought in bull manure that wasn't finished. So it all turned into weeds and then great vegetative overgrowth. So it was like a huge amount of trial and error, and it was all motivated by getting my kids safe food and my wife food that can actually heal and nourish her, and also food that I could eat. So we really were bound and had really these strictures on our life that forced us into this in many ways. but we feel really blessed in retrospect because we made all these choices really early on with our kids and our own health and our own marriage. Because of our health issues, we decided to have kids early. I'm turning 43 this year, and I have an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old, right? So we made these decisions, and gardening was one of them, and it's just a fundamental, foundational piece of our lives, and yeah, it all started with the health thing.
Incredible. Yeah, I've heard that story that you've mentioned in other videos that you've filmed. You have a really extensive YouTube channel. For those that haven't checked out his YouTube channel, I'll definitely have a link in the description section below. One of the things I know you for most, I feel like, is the book, this regenerative soil book. This is my go-to. If anybody is looking for an advanced type book, highly recommend this book. It is definitely one of my favorites. I made sure, I think you signed this one. And I also have your microscopy book. Yep, signed on there. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, you must have gotten it from me because only people who buy them from me, I sign. And the thing is, that's my 23rd book in the permaculture gardening era of my writing. I wrote science fiction books before. I wrote visual music theory books for guitarists, and even before all that, in high school, I wrote like fantasy books I never finished. But I've been writing and trying to figure this out and trying to serve and do all these things as a writer the whole time. And so a lot of people see the success of that book and they're like, holy cow. And I'm like, yeah, I'm 10 years in. That's my 23rd book. There's a reason. Kept hitting and hitting until it broke through, So yeah, no, it definitely was an incredible journey to get there. And then it was wild because I wrote that book for gardeners, for growers. And then John Kemp really kind of leaned on me to make it more for farmers. And so I was like, oh yeah, I can figure out how to generalize and jump out and then have it go to scale and bulk. And when I did that, I didn't realize the impact it would have. And how, because I stretched the context from small scale to large scale and then went from micro to macro, how much it would help people. And because I've got my own interpretation in its nature, I'm looking at other people saw other things in it than I saw because I'm simply showcasing nature. And so it went beyond me. And so because I focused so much on just showcasing nature, it allowed people to go deeper than even I. So I learned from my students. I learned from these other farmers who are using it and applying it. And it's been this wild gift, not just to me in my life, because it's a best-selling, top-selling book, but also to everyone it has reached and touched and where they've been able to apply it. So yeah, no, I just want to give context so that it was so much led up to that moment, and it had this power that transcended so much of what I was doing and hoping to do, and so it's just a wonderful thing, a wonderful thing that happened.
It's an incredible book, and I talk about it all the time in my content, and I refer people to it all the time because it is really that good. And I'll probably have a link to it down in the description section below so people can easily get to it and check it out. But yeah, let's get into some gardening topics. So I have a wide variety of folks in here as far as experience levels. So I got a lot of beginners, intermediate, probably less advanced folks on here. But yeah, I just want to give you a heads up on that right off the bat so you're aware who the audience is. I want to start off with pH. So we know that the pH in the rhizosphere can be 2 points different than the pH in the medium. So for example, if it's 6.5 pH, the rhizosphere could actually be 8.5 pH or be 5.5 pH. So because of that, many people are completely ignoring pH. Talk to us about pH, and do you recommend pH measurements or not?
Okay, so I totally recommend pH measurements. What you have to recognize is that they expend energy to do that. So the energy is protons from photosynthesis that are used to change the pH, right? And so they're expending energy. So the closer you are to the Goldilocks range around that root, the more energy you can dedicate to other things. And those protons can then go to releasing more nutrients, releasing more things, and also energizing the microbes. The other thing to think about is the root meristem cells, which are the tip of the root. That's the most acidic point. And then as the root ages, it becomes more and more alkaline. So the tip is the most acidic, and then it's more alkaline as it goes. And so you get a gradient effect. And what happens essentially is the tip is where everything happens. So your root is boring through the soil, and it's actually seeking nutrients and microbes, like hunting. That's why it does its whole behavior. It's following the path of least resistance, following water pathways, nutrient pathways, and it's breeding microbes, sucking them in, and removing their nutrition, and then pushing the remaining microbes that survive this process out, or they're staying in because they're endophytes and they can just release nitrogen to hang out. While it's doing that, it's releasing all this energy, and it's acidifying it, absolutely, but it's causing a nutrient release because it's a differential. So it's like, yeah, it's 2 points difference. So what's that going to do? It's going to release the nutrients that are held there comfortably in that pH. Now, not because you lower the pH, it's loosening things up and releasing them. You have a depletion zone. Following that tip, there's like a wake of depletion. This is where mycorrhizal fungi, when partnering it, sends its hyphae out past the depletion zone and gets more nutrients. This is why partnering with it expands the actual root zone we talk about. We talk about it makes it more surface area. It's expanding past that depletion zone and sucking in more nutrients, and then transforming them and bringing them directly to the root. So, and that also changes the pH relationships further down. So if you don't have a mycorrhizal relationship, the gradient is going to be much more severe. But if you do, it's going to be less so, because it's still going to be able to reach past that depletion zone, and it's still going to be able to release digestive enzymes and solubilize nutrients and bring them in. And so it's a little bit more complicated, of a space than people have, The problem is folks don't think about time, and they don't think in 3 dimensions, and they don't think about stacking effects. So people talk about it like, oh, it's chemical, in part, but there's also biological things happening, and there's also electrical things happening. And so all these things are happening all at the same time. And so it's hard for people to visualize. And so that's why I draw so many pictures, and that's why I separate it and then I put it together in my teaching so that people recognize that, oh, this is all happening in the same time. Or like the soil food web conception, where there's like microbial manures and then they get eaten by the plant. That doesn't happen that's not happening instantly. That happens over time, and the manures build up in the soil so that when the root arrives and depletes that zone, it gets those manures. So again, time, that's like a huge span of time we're talking about, maybe years, to build up that effect, so that it's noticeable. And then we've got things that are happening sandwiched right on top of each other. You know what I mean? So just like rhizophagy is happening and mycorrhizal fungi can be doing its thing at the same time, which is, to a lot of people, are like, but how? Yeah, they allow things to flow through themselves, and it's remarkable, and it's actually visible. You can see it. So roots, they acidify. They're releasing. We have to remember that it's a release of energy. They're creating a differential, but they also can create that differential with a lot less effort if you're closer to the Goldilocks zone. And the Goldilocks zone, depending on your plant type, could be very different. Blueberries are going to be way more acidic than your corn, and that's going to be way more acidic than your beets, right? And so you need to know your Goldilocks zone for what you're planting, or you plant in a mix and know that some of these things are simply hormesis. hormetic stress. In other words, like when we work out, we're stressing the body, but it makes us stronger. But if you were to too much weight, it'd be like ripping and hurtful. There's a right level of stress because we need that differentiation. And so I do cover crops and I mix in some things like amaranth. I mix in some things like brassicas. And I also have nitrogen fixers. And more evidence shows that just doing nitrogen fixers, the whole field of nitrogen fixers, is not a good idea. So that mixture that I created this mix called the Five Cousins because they kind of all like bully each other a little bit, like cousins do. And it's like, that's good for the soil. You know what I mean? And it's like the buckwheat stealing nitrogen from the cowpeas, and the cowpeas are going past their normal expression of nitrogen fixation to this genetic full potential because they're like, it's not piling up properly. And so you get this push and pull, Daikon radish sops up all the available nitrogen in the soil so that the cowpeas are like, there's nothing here. And then they're like going extra hard. And so we can create those kinds of antagonisms and differentiation and all those kinds of things to stimulate things to a degree. But we also have to make things as easy as possible for the plants. Because when the plants have discretion and they have excess funds, they invest them. So what do I mean by that? Well, they create those terpenes, they create the smell, taste, they create all the things that we love and associate with food are only created at that like abundance level, at that, everything else is taken care of, now we're going to taste good. Everything else is taken care of, now we're going to smell good. And that's where all the medicinal qualities happen too. And so we really need to recognize that the next stage of our growing, of making food into medicine, of regenerative ag, is getting to that place where we're not stressing plants out past their ability. We're stressing them out just enough so that they're like, immune system on. They're like, we're going to trigger, their immune system, like ISR, right? And we can do that with just applying microbes that are beneficial. So it's like the right kind of stress is an endophyte that it's already inside it to a small degree, but now we amped it up, and so it's at a beneficial degree. It's like probiotics, for plants, but it triggers them. And so it's in that Goldilocks zone of stress. So I really value all these paradigms. I do test for pH, even though it's an average. You're going to have pH jump 4 to 9 in most healthy soils, like micrometer to micrometer, but we're always taking averages, and I always do that. That gives us a really good window. And then when you're looking at your tests and you've got your parts per million, or you have even your microbes and your biological testing, the pH gives you so much context and then reference point. So you may not test for redox, but if you know what it is, you know that it's drier or wetter, right? And so you could be like, wow, this nutrient's being locked out. It's in the soil. I added it, and the plant's not getting it. Oh, man, I think we need to water more. Or, is the intern watering too much? Because they usually do. Too much. And so you can track these things down when you have the understanding. And pH isn't everything. Like I said, you got to think EH too to know what's missing, why, when things don't add up. And then pH is also contextual. For instance, if you are doing compost and it's hot compost, please pH test it. You're going to go, oh, it's pH 8. Huh. It's very high in nitrates. Huh. Well, just slow down for a second, because no one was testing this until I started bringing this up. And they're adding it. And so they're in California. They're already pH 7.5. Do you think adding pH 8 is going to help? No. And they're like, most of my garden soil is 50% compost. And it's like, they just shifted their whole garden up to pH 7.8. And now everyone's unhappy, and they're locking out all the nutrients. And the nutrients are there. but it's alkaline and oxidized, so it's locked out. So it's like really critical to have these things in our knowledge so that we can evaluate things in a way that actually serves our comprehension. Most of what I teach is allowing people to see things as they actually are for themselves in such a way that you don't trust me, bro, stuff. Instead, it's like, if you see this, then test, and you can see, and like, you can actually prove it to yourself. And it's like not me imposing, not us imposing, it's us asking questions that lead to answers that we can then test and verify. And that has been the turning point for me in many ways. And that's why this book, I think, is so valuable, because we co-create the future together as people read this, because they can see and test it and see it for themselves, and then make decisions based upon what they know now. So it's been awesome. And the database that I'm creating now is so that people can see all these things in the open. Because before, people take actions, they take a test, and people take a test at the beginning of the season, they take the action, then they eat the thing at the end of the season and go, we did it, and they don't test anything else, right? I want to do before and after testing with the actions in the middle, so that we can see what you added, when you added it, in your methodology in reference to what happened before and afterwards. And then have that be ubiquitous so that gardeners, market gardeners, small farmers, mid-size and large-scale farmers can see the gradient of expression. And they can see also, like, they can kind of see the future too. They're like looking at the market gardeners applying regenerative methods that they haven't figured out how to scale yet. And they're like, And the people who figure that out will be... And that's viral. I want things to become viral. And it really goes back to just a simple idea that when we have enough information and we look through the lens of nature, things become self-evident and people make really good decisions, because people then are empowered. And when people have the right lenses and ability to critically think, and the right information sets, they make really good decisions. And that's always been my experience. So that's what I'm doing. I'm really trying to stay out of the way and let nature do the talking and the showcasing and the speaking for people. I mean, there are things I've discovered in microscopy that I haven't said publicly yet, and I'm letting my students discover. And they're all like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But this is part of the reason why I want the database. Because then everyone's going to see it, and they're all going to go, wait. Because that's how we really cause massive change, big change, and fast. So that's kind of like the larger vision around all that stuff. We need testing.
Really interesting stuff there. Now, you mentioned redox and EH, and I feel like that's something that we should get deeper into. I don't think a lot of people really talk about it. What is soil redox potential, and how can gardeners manage it?
So yeah, if we go back to high school chemistry, we remember redox, or maybe some of us don't remember high school chemistry, and that's okay. Redox is a combination of two words, reduction and oxidation. It reveals a fundamental truth about life on Earth and all life in biology. If you look up oxidative stress, it's the underlying symptom that leads to disease, cancer. All illnesses are linked to inflammation, and inflammation is oxidative stress. They're one thing. And so you're like, whoa, why? What is oxidative stress? What is oxidation? Why is it inflammation? When we take a piece of wood and we light fire to it and it combusts, it is flame, right? Because it's oxidizing the wood. So oxidation is the liberation of energy. So oxidized food would be dried out food. And then an oxidized soil is dried out soil. All the energy has been lost. And water is also, in many ways, functions as energy, or a storage of energy for so many things in life. If you think about photosynthesis as one input, light into photosynthesis as one input, water is the other. and they're doing hydrolysis and they're releasing protons, energy. So we have to recognize that oxidation is the loss of energy, and that means reduction. Despite it sounding like we're reducing something, Matt, reduction is the gain in energy. I know the chemistry folks, they like to confuse us and have their own little ivory tower of comprehension and confusion. Many different branches of science do this, right? Language is a way that back, hundreds and thousands of years ago, you would keep people out of your special circles. So what they've done is made it so that people don't realize that their bodies are energy-based. It's the drop in energy in our bodies that leads to cancer and all these different things. This is why Dr. Zach Bush, when he tests for people and their health, he's testing the charge on the outside of their cell. He's testing the redox potential of the person. And that's how he's telling how healthy they are. So energy is fundamental to everything. And in fact, if you go back 50 years ago, icing the body electric, everything was energy based, and there's all this stuff. And then suddenly all these people came into that area of new discovery and became very woo woo around it, and then created this kickback reaction. And then it became something that, energy. Ooh, no one talks about that. That's pseudoscience. Meanwhile, all the chemists know energy is how everything is done. In fact, the charges on the outside of every nutrient and element is actually the combination lock piece that fits into each reaction inside the plant. Is the charge difference that creates the ability for it to finish that reaction. So everything is energy based. So redox is the gain and loss of energy, and the potential to it is the holding of the energy and also the potential to exchange energy. So if it's oxidized, well, there's not much energy, and so you can't exchange much energy. You know what I mean? It's already been lost. It's already been burned, right? It's ash now. It's lost all that BTU, right? All that potential burning energy. And so that's really what we're talking about, is the actual energetic possibility and potential of your soil. And what I've already said is it's linked to moisture. So your soils are all dried out and oxidized. They're going to be lacking in energy. Now, this doesn't mean that it's all alkaline. If you're in Montana, Idaho, and eastern Washington, you're going to have a lot of aluminum. And you're going to have things in the soil that are going to, mineral-wise, be acidic. But it's all dried out, high desert, and all that makes it oxidized. So that's a more difficult environment, no doubt, because as you draw down the pH, you start loosening things and releasing things. There needs to be a lot more soil organic matter, a lot more buffering, and then you need to be testing your pH regularly so that you don't dip too much, and you stay in that Goldilocks zone. In that situation, the hot compost that's pH 8 is exactly what you need, right? To keep it in the Goldilocks zone, right? And so it's very, very personal, very specific to our climate when we're talking about EH and pH. And for a long time, I taught, because my original mentor, Elaine Ingham, taught that there's this line of succession between the desert and old growth forest, but that's actually a diagonal through an XY pH EH chart. So I've been teaching just a bandwidth of truth, and it's true, but all those Montanans and Idahoans and Washington folk were like, oh, what the heck is wrong with my soil then? Because it made no sense to them. And so it's really important to understand your situation from both pH and EH. Because when you put them together, you go, oh, I see where I am actually. That's why that's that way. And then when you're doing testing for minerals and you're super high in aluminum or super high in something else, that's causing antagonism, that's causing alkaline states. I mean, because we got limestone bedrock here, so it's like when it rains, it's like, and you flood the field, you have an alkalinizing effect actually, because all that acidity then combines with the limestone below, and the limestone goes, well, there's a lot more of me than you, and then and then it lowers your pH. So we have to recognize these effects are real, these effects are trackable, but these effects are also, you can deal with them because, like you said at the beginning, you need to be worrying about the pH around your roots. What if you added things in the root zone, and this is what a lot of people are doing, that are acidifying in the root zone, that give the plant the energy it needs to change it itself. And so there's a lot of options on how to do that. But the reason we pay attention to redox, the wetness and dryness of a site, is we can easily go too far in both directions. And depending on where we are, it's going to release completely different things. And so understanding where you are tells you what dangers you have and where to push and then what techniques will work best for you.
You explained that better than I think anybody has ever explained it to me before. So I appreciate that one. Now, you mentioned a little bit about mycorrhizal fungi, and I'd be willing to bet that the folks listening in, there's got to be over 50% of the people are supplementing. They're adding in some mycorrhizal fungi into the medium. I feel like a lot of the home growers here that are tuning in, majority are home growers indoors versus outdoors. Now, that being said, you hear a lot of people talking about the application of mycorrhizal fungi if they're using a product. It's often said that sprinkling it directly onto the root zone during transplant is the best way to go about it. And I've heard people saying that it's significantly less effective to mix those microbes into water, mycorrhizal fungi into water, and then do a soil drench with it.
Of course.
Is it less efficient doing it that way versus sprinkling directly on the roots, or what's your take on that?
So I have more information that is going to provide a new way. So the way the microbes work with seeds is they partner immediately with the root coming out, and then they stay in tandem with the root growth. So let's just think about surface area and application. If I take the seed, and some of you are going to be doing tiny seeds, right? Not like big pea seeds or bean seeds. So you're doing a tiny seed. Think about the surface area and requirement of mycorrhizal fungi, and realize that if it's there when it begins, it's going to be there the whole time. Okay? So giving them the initial microbes then is the smartest move because you use the least amount product. Now imagine you have these already grown roots and you're trying to dust these things on them, and you got a speck here, a speck here, a speck here, a speck here. Well, they'll go in and do their thing if it's not spores, and if it's propagules, which is sections of root that are inoculated from last year. That's effective, not spores. Spores will germinate when they want to, and spores are in case we get ice ages. So think about that. It's in case everything goes wrong. So you're going to put propagules, so Myco Apply, Myco Max, Mycose by Extreme Gardening. Those are three that I know that do that. And then it's going to start from there, and there, and there. It's fungi. So it starts at the point of contact and then spreads out from there. So if you have powdered, like the wettable powder, WP Mycose from Extreme Garden, or if you just take mortar and pestle to like your pelletized stuff and then add it on, then your seeds are going to germinate, and it's all going to just immediately bond with it, and then it's going to keep pace with it as it grows, and it's going to become this big old plant. Meanwhile, how much did you actually spend per plant? Very, very, very little, because it just coated the seeds. And this goes with all your microbes. Think about inoculating with the endophytes that can reproduce inside the plant, because they're feeding off photosynthetic sugars and nitrogen that comes in. And so they're actually completing photosynthesis and nitrogen synthesis. So they're replicating. So again, we add these in initially. And if you're doing lactic acid bacteria, that's an endophyte that also stimulates mycorrhizal bacteria. So you're partnering with all these different things, and they're there the whole time. So it's about timing, and it's about like being able to visually verify this. Like I can just, and most people don't have this yet. A lot of my students do, but I can just turn on that light, that little blue light, and then I can see that that's bound to the seeds. So I could take five of my seeds, inoculate them with the powder, put them in do a germination test. Put them in a folded over napkin or paper towel that's damp inside a plastic Ziploc bag that's not fully closed on a warm surface, and let it germinate and look at them under the microscope, and I can see that they fully take. So I can verify this for myself that, yeah, Matt is telling the truth. This is the kind of science I like, because then everyone else can verify it for themselves and go, yeah, I've done it. That's how it works. And that is the kind of ground we all can stand on. And then we can put the images on the database and then have that replication play out in public. And so all the people who have paid more money than my programs, who have cognitive dissonance and cannot let go, they'll be able to let go. Because though I have seen people literally look at things and go, yeah, but how do you know? And I'm like, well, you can see it. And they're like, right. But you could have made that picture. And I'm like, oh, dear. Because the reality is, it's like we can all just go look, but there's a lot of people. I mean, we live in a day and age where there are people that see things right in front of their face and can't see it. And I think part of that's the food. I think part of it's cognitive dissonance. They've invested in a way of thinking. They've invested in a methodology or a program that they paid more money, but we also see it playing out all over in science and everything. So we have to create things that are self-evident, and also so that people can move forward with confidence, improvising and innovating in such a way that the science moves forward in a viral way. So I mean, if you think about automobile, that's how it worked. There were 1,000 different automobiles before the Model T emerged. And it was in that innovation and that back and forth that really citizen science, that created that. And right now, we're the product, all of us are the products of indoor growers for 30, 40 years doing the R&D that we're all benefiting from. And again, it was citizen science. Again, it was people doing the work and then sharing it, in these forums with secret names and everything, for years. Getting that feedback loop, and that's all I'm doing. That's all I'm modeling it afterwards, is allowing that natural feedback loop, that natural replication science, and that viralocity, to quote Brendan Burchard, to actually foment change. So that's what's happening, and that's what I'm building.
Incredible. Yeah. So if you're basically saying you coating the seed before germination is actually effective. So if they're doing the paper towel method, they could just put the seed on the paper towel, sprinkle a little bit of mycorrhizal fungi on there. It'll then germinate, and they can plant that directly in there. Now, what if they instead they let it germinate?
I wouldn't do that for like my planting. Like I would do that to verify that my mycorrhizal fungi that I bought is good. And that also proves to ourselves that it stays in tandem as it grows. And we're like, once it's inoculated, right? But that's how all the plants evolved to do it. And so being able to see that and verify that, A, tells you this is something that's strong, it's a good inoculant, it works. And then B, I'm going to be able to inoculate all my seeds this way. And that's what I care about.
So if you germinate a seed and then just dip that taproot in mycorrhizal fungi and then plant it, that's perfectly acceptable. And then would you recommend, it's not recommended to do any mycorrhizal fungi applications after that because it kind of grows with the plant?
What I would do is I would actually not, because I mean, they're so sensitive, those emerging roots. I don't mess with them. So what I would do is I would do a soak of the seed with mycorrhizal fungi and the endophytes, like are effective microbes, EM, or the equivalent, which is yeast, propylon sulfur bacteria, and lactic acid bacteria, would do those three. And then you would soak it. And so it would be soaked up into the seed. The seed would have nutrients and have microbes and all this stuff happening all at the same time. Because, I mean, with EM, there's some leftover, carbon from the molasses and stuff. So it soaks that up. It has that extra energy and potential. And then you plant that. So after like an hour to 6 hours, this is a smaller seed, Matt. So I would do an hour to 2 hours of soaking, maybe max 2 hours. I would observe. Different seeds are going to behave different ways. The larger the seed, the longer the soak. The smaller the seed, the shorter the soak. And so I would soak it in that, and then so what I do is I pour off the excess, and then a lot of this inoculant's heavier, especially if you let it settle for an hour, so it's at the bottom like a slurry, and then I would mix it with the seeds, and it would like subtly scarify the seeds a little bit, because there's a little bit grit to that, and get that all deeper and embedded and encoded, and then I would plant those. So it's, and you're like, oh, Matt, well, I'm doing a large farm, and can I just add it as a powdered amendment like my rhizobia? You can totally do that. That's totally okay. Though you want it to stick as much as possible. So maybe adding a little bit of water or a little bit of binder or something. Maybe something that's damp. Maybe something like compost or something as a carrier that'll keep it in contact with the seeds, so that it goes in together and is right there. But most of us, if we're doing small scale, we're doing plantings that are indoors. We're going to be babying our seeds. We paid a lot for these seeds. And so you can do that slurry, and then you can plant them individually. And again, doing the testing on your mycorrhizal fungi before you use it on everything proves to yourself, A, that you made the right purchase, and then B, that this is going to be a good inoculation. Let's go for this.
Understood. Yeah, thanks for breaking down the details on that one. Good actionable advice for sure. I want to flip it up and talk about something which I believe I heard on either your Instagram or your YouTube channel. And it was in regards to mushroom blocks like oyster. You had mentioned that it actually kills off beneficial nematodes. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, it's pissed off so many people. So, so the reality is there are papers where they're deworming cattle and sheep with oyster mushroom, mycelium and oyster mushroom blocks, which are mycelium, right? And so my idea was like, oh, this is a natural dewormer. This is awesome because the effects of this are temporary. What happened was people that didn't understand the science around it got really mad. And I actually had a person that used to be a friend freak out and kind of lose their minds because they thought I was assaulting their business because they do mushroom block gardens. And it was super upsetting because it's like they didn't even hear me. And then it became this weird thing. It was just really wild. And so I don't know if this was like a thing that they attacked because of other things in their life, but it was weird. They basically got so upset because they felt like I was saying that the oyster mushrooms are going to destroy soil. The reality is oyster mushrooms, when you add them to the soil, will kill all the nematodes that it comes in contact with. But this is the same with reishi. This is the same with turkey tail, like a bunch of mushrooms. So I'm not talking out of school. This is already published and well known. And so I just was sharing the information. I didn't invent it. I didn't, you know what I mean? And so it was shocking in that regard. But then it was like, they're not even reading. Because I literally posted, after I said that, in the next post, another article showing that within days and up to a week, you have that die-off being replaced by a flush of beneficial nematodes. So it's successional. So just like when we clear the slate the right way, beneficials come back and not, using chemical sterilizers causes bad things to come back. When you do a biological reset, you have good biology come back. So I was really bothered by their attack, because I've been trying for years to help this person, and so it just was something that I put out there because it's true. It's functional. You can be deworming your animals, and you can be using a microscope and a hemocytometer and checking their stool to make sure that you dewormed them. You know what I mean? And then you can verify with the same microscope that those soils go through that dip and come out the other end. So I was showing something that I knew that people, if they just took the time, could verify, could follow, and then could do confidently. And what my good friends, like Angel Schatz, who literally has given out thousands of these blocks, heard me say the first part of it, and she literally was like, "That's awesome, Matt. I never knew that," and had no qualms. Nothing was upsetting to her. She's the best. So Central Texas Mycology has been giving out these blocks, but she knows the gardens are beautiful, and so she knew because of her experience that it was okay. And so then when I followed up with that second article, she was like, "Ha, that's what we're seeing on our end," because she's a mycologist. She's looking at all these things with open eyes and allowing nature to speak to her. And so it is the case that they do that. It is the case that we can replace all this dewormer that people are using, which hilariously enough is often ivermectin. But so we can use oyster mushrooms and replace all that, and get our animals' manure to a place where we can use in compost again. Because some people are using dewormed compost and it's ruining their compost and they're all freaked out. So we can do incredible things with natural modalities, but so much of it is not letting hysteria, fear, or just like unbridled optimism, so that people generalize like the winds. It's like we gotta contextualize the winds so that we see the caveats, the ranges of expression, and also just the limitations, right? So I definitely brought that up, and I definitely saw wild reactions to that, and it was sobering because they said crazy things. They were saying that I was stealing the microbes with the microscope by seeing them and naming them, and I was like, well, no, actually, someone already has named all these. We're just seeing who they are, and so it's quite a world we live in right now. There's a lot of people who are freaking out. There's a lot of people that need to go out in nature and meditate.
I hear you. Yeah, that's one thing with content creation, where it's you do your best to try to share good information that's going to be valuable to people, and there's always that somebody who spins it and turns into something negative, and then you get attacked for it. That's part of the job, I guess, right?
Yeah,
but anyways,
definitely. I was a high school English teacher, and I've seen it all. And most of the time, the attacks really just are reflections on the other person and the hardship that they're going through. Like this person I'm talking about, I wish them nothing but good things. I really hope that the animosity drains.
All right, so switching it up a little bit here, I want to get your thoughts on the 24-hour light cycle. Now, we have so many folks out there that they want to get grow plants faster, get a better result, so they're putting their indoor plants on 24 hours of light and 0 hours of darkness. Now, the nighttime when lights are off, that's when sugar transportation happens. So my question for you is, does it happen less with that 24-hour light cycle, therefore negatively impacting plant growth at all?
Yeah, so we have to remember that there's a wide range of plants and plant expression, right? And so there are some plants that are going to grow really well in the land of the midnight sun, right? And they're going to have mechanisms that allow them to just keep going and growing. But we also have respiration. plants respire, and they only do that when they're resting. And so my instinct is that you'll get different things. Like, we're going to get different relationships of microbes and different like terpenes and different medicinal qualities from both these methods. I want to see side by sides on full workups on like the parts per million, on the phenolics, the terpenes, all those things, to really say. And you're going to probably have differences in expression in terms of like where the plant's from. So let's say you're growing a certain plant from like the Himalayas, right? Those are going to behave very differently from like the same family from Africa, right? And those genes do exist in strains, right? And so what I've seen in practice with people doing indoor grows, from them flushing things to like the artificial light cycles, they're all trying to imitate or shortcut nature. Why do we do light dep? We do light dep because we're trying to imitate the end of the season when there's less light. And so if we take that as the guiding principle, you got to do what's most natural. And like, that's the principles behind this. I literally asked, what's most natural? How did nature originally do this? And whenever we see amazing plants, and we're obviously talking about a specific amazing plant, there's abilities of these plants that kind of blow our minds. But what's best for the plant and what creates the best product is really the question. The plant can do crazy things. Like, for instance, Canadian growers, when I talked to, Joy Beckerman, Joy?
No.
She's the reason that the fiber cousin of the plant we're talking about is legal. She was the lawyer who fought the federal government, sponsored by, John Rulak's Nativa, so that they could do those foods. She had me talking to Canadian growers, and they figured out that there's no ceiling on nitrogen. So they're raising the synthetic nitrogen higher and higher, and the plants are getting bigger and bigger. And because they don't care about the seeds, they only care about the fiber, they're like, well, no one's going to eat it. Let's go. And so it doesn't matter if it's high in nitrate. It didn't matter that it's like inedible. It didn't matter that it never left vegetative state and didn't go to reproductive and didn't form seeds. So they're just like throwing it on there, and the soil is a desert. They're destroying the soil. So the whole narrative around like, well, the soil will be saved by this plant. No. Not the way they're doing it. Not industrial growers in Canada. And they're modeling for Americans. And so we have to recognize that there are aspects where you can abuse the system, but is that good? Because it's like, yeah, you get 2 years where it's like phenomenal, and then your soil's dead, and then they have to rotate it. And then they go to this thing, which is so depressing. And this is most of the Pacific Northwest, this is most of Canada. It's like, well, we'll come back in 3 years and farm it like abusively again, and then we won't be able to do it for another 3 years, but then we'll do it again. And so they leave it fallow, and they let it go, and they show back up, and then they abuse it again. And then they like leave it for 3 years. Meanwhile, they could be farming that patch of land every year and having the soil improve, their products improve, and their bottom line improve. So that's really like a lot of what I'm doing is getting people to recognize the holistics involved and to be able to see and understand the longevity of their operation. Because yeah, there's plenty of things that we could do that could stretch it this way or that way or push things, but asking what's most natural has a holistic effect. If we're not burning our soil, you could amend and then use that soil again. Or you could treat and then ferment and use that soil again. Like a bunch of things you could do. You could even dump them all in the backyard, amend it, tarp it, ferment it, and then use it all again. There's a bunch of things that people can do that they're not doing. So that's really my instinct when I hear like that. Like, can we go all the way? It's like, plants are pretty amazing. They're wanting to survive, and like we can do like these hoops and make them do these weird things. Like, they have plants now like imitating plastic leaves. And they're like, the plant can see, and it's like, yeah, the plant can see because it's trying to survive. You know what I mean? He's like, we're torturing things to see how far they can go. We're doing all this stuff. And instead of saying like what would be best for the plant and letting that speak to us and looking at what that actually looks like. Because when a plant's super healthy, it's going to actually invest in the next generation. So when a plant's super healthy, partnering with mycorrhizal fungi, it actually leaves the hyphal expression of the fungi around the cell. So you'll have like this lipid-rich hyphae that's just sitting there. And that's what becomes the inoculant when that root dies for next year. So when a new root touches it, it inoculates the new root. What happens in hard times is the plant actually reabsorbs that and it eats the lipids as energy, because lipids are like the best form of energy, the longest lasting form of energy. We know it's fats, right? So it's an investment in the mycorrhizal fungi that they can liquidate in times of stress, or they can pass on to their children next year, because who's going to be growing in the soil of their root zone? Most likely their seeds, their children. So plants, when they have enough, are going to do things that are going to enrich the soil, going to have succession and regenerative qualities so that it happens the next year. The microbes are preserved for next year and passed on. They're going to do things that we can't do, or we don't want to spend the money, and the time doing, and they're just going to do it for us. So that when I hear that and I think about that, that's really what I see as like what we should shift to.
Got it. Yeah, reusing the soil, for example, that's something I've been reusing the same soil now for 7 grows. And, ever since I started really getting into organics and realized that it is possible to reuse over and over again, I have been, and I've been saving so much money. It's been awesome. Keeping on that topic, when you kind of re-enrich your soil with minerals, I want to get into your recommendations a little bit. What minerals do you recommend gardeners use to replenish their soils? Did you recommend things like rock dust, seaweed, compost, manure? What's your general recommendations? I know you should get a soil test and see what is missing from your soil and then kind of go from there. But generally speaking about the types of minerals, what do you recommend? And also, what should growers avoid?
Yeah, so there's a few different things. Someone just in Florida recently figured out how to remove arsenic from seaweed. So all the fears around like arsenic buildup in our soil because we're using seaweed, we're going to be able to figure out and avoid, right? I really like seaweed. Makes sense. We think about Led Zeppelin, Robert Plant, mountains flow into the sea. It's true. They do. And that's where all the minerals have gone, right? And so bringing those back is really effective. I really like ocean minerals. I love the idea of farming the coastline to bring the eutrophication down and then return those nutrients to the soil in such a way that sticks this time. And so I really like that cycle because permaculturally, it's like the bioregional solution, right? We've had all this runoff, all this phosphate, nitrogen fertilizer from all the lawns. It's actually right there killing things in the waters, like, coastal Florida, right? And it's like, if we just do vertical farming, we just do seaweed farming, crustacean farming, those things can be turned into fertilizers very easily. And then, and not only that, it can be done in such a DIY way, Korean natural farming, we can do all this. And so I really like that as a modality and as a generalized system for fixing a lot of things. I like rock dust, but with the caveat that if you don't look at what's on your rock dust test, you may be adding a lot of aluminum. So, right, and Dan Kittredge years ago said, whatever local rock dust you have is the best rock dust. not in my experience. I've had too many students, and I've seen too many examples of local areas that are just like, no, you might want to bring something else in, and that's okay. But it's knowing that moving forward with open eyes, I think that is the most critical. So look at the test readouts. And different kelps, different seaweeds are from different areas, and they have totally different readouts. So I would look at those things, and depending on what you're growing, if it's a heavy feeder, I would be doing, I really like bunny manure. Bunny manure has been like the gold, in so many operations that I've done. I've been like, where's the local FFA or FAA instructor who's doing rabbits? Because it's like they have the best manure. Of course, you got to monitor what they're eating. You got to know what they're eating and what they're giving them. But man, I in terms of manure, goat and bunny manure, because it's cold, it's not already hot. Marco's microbes originally talked about how he loves it too. I think that's a great usage, great amendment. But in general, other than like those minimal mineral kind of amendments, I really rely upon microbes, because so much of the nutrients that we want are there. They're just not solubilized. And the only way to solubilize them is either crazy extremes with pH or something, or you just simply have microbes. And the microbes are mining it and unlocking it and solubilizing it, transporting it, transforming it. And that autonomy that we give to the microbes in the plant and the soil microbes, it creates this economy that ends up feeding things better and at such a rate and complexity that we can't imitate. So I really like seaweed. I like rock dust, with the caveat that if we don't look, we don't see, and we can easily get bitten. So do that.
Well, all right. Some good recommendations there. Well, Matt, this talk has been awesome. I mean, I'm sure we could go on for another 2 hours if we really wanted to, but we're going to wrap things up here. Can you tell listeners how they can find you and what you have upcoming in the future?
Yeah. If you go to the site regenerativesoilscience.com, it'll have, and you just type that in, it's a lead link. So I'm not super sophisticated on the internet. I figured out like lead links, and they all lead to my courses and all my stuff on the Kajabi platform. So I've got like 15 online courses. I've got, over 24 different books, but regenerativesoilscience.com is the place to start with everything. It's a place to go. Next month, I'm going to be starting regenerative soil microscopy, the new season. And the month after that, we'll be starting regenerative soil. Both those are open though, so you could hop in and take it self-paced, and then you have lifetime access to the lives, so you could join us at any point. This month, I'm going to be doing an advanced permaculture student online session as well. So all this stuff where I'm zooming out and talking bioregionally and talking about all these kind of things, that kind of thinking started there. So that is advancedpermaculturestudent.com. You can check that out too. But if you just type my name in, Matt Powers, into Google, not Bing for some reason, but Google, you'll just see the whole first page is me. And you can find me at Matt Powers Soil on Instagram, on Twitter, and just type in Matt Powers on YouTube and you'll find me there.
I'll definitely have a link to your YouTube channel, since this is being posted on YouTube, down in the description section below so people can easily get to it. And want to give a big thanks to the folks on Patreon. Patreon.com/MrGrowIt. 100% of what is donated through there go right back into the podcast. Thank you so much. The folks that are being scrolled on the screen right now are in the producer tier. Special thanks to you. Matt, once again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I have learned quite a bit, and this is one that I'm going to replay over and over again to continue to try to grasp this information and hard code it into my brain. And like I mentioned, we could continue on the conversation. What I'm going to do is ask the audience, if you want to see a part 2 with Matt, drop it down in the comment section below, put part 2, and then maybe we can get him back on here to continue the conversation.
Heck yeah.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll catch you in the next episode. Peace out.